The trauma bay at Clearwater Regional Medical Center went absolutely still. Not the quiet that settles when things are going well. The kind that falls when something is wrong in a way nobody has a word for yet. A critically wounded Army Ranger, stripped of his body armor and losing blood at a rate that defied survivability charts, had just raised his right hand off the table. His fingers were shaking badly. His eyes were half open, glassy, with shock and morphine and the particular 1,000-yard stare of a man who had already started doing the math on whether he was going to make it. He found the woman standing in the corner, the one in the plain navy scrubs, the one nobody had spoken to directly since she walked in 20 minutes ago, and he pressed his bloodied fingers to his temple in a weak, wavering salute. "Doc Winslow," he breathed. Then the monitor went flat. Clearwater Regional was the kind of hospital that existed in the spaces between larger places. It sat on the eastern edge of Billings, Montana, 60 miles from anything resembling a major city and 30 minutes from Fort Harrison, a National Guard and Reserve training installation that was more administrative hub than combat base. Clearwater was a Level 2 trauma center, which sounded impressive until you understood what it actually meant. Good enough for car accidents and farming equipment injuries, staffed by people who were competent and dedicated and perpetually underfunded, but not built for catastrophe. Tara Winslow arrived on a Tuesday in early March, and she looked exactly like what her paperwork said she was. A 31-year-old ER tech, freshly certified, no hospital experience, with a 2-year gap in her employment history she'd listed vaguely as personal leave. She was medium height, medium build, with dark brown hair she kept pulled back so tightly it looked almost institutional. She had a stillness about her that some people mistook for shyness and others mistook for blankness. She carried her stethoscope in her left scrub pocket instead of around her neck, which Colleen Burr, the charge nurse, who ran the ER floor like a warden running a tight facility, noticed immediately and filed away as either laziness or ignorance. "Hayes will show you the supply room," Colleen said on Tara's first morning, not bothering to make eye contact. Hayes was a 22-year-old nursing student doing his clinical rotation, and he led Tara to the back hallway with the enthusiasm of someone who had been handed a job he didn't want. Colleen didn't say welcome. She didn't offer orientation. She assigned Tara the linen restocking cart and moved on. Dr. Simon Beaumont, chief of emergency medicine at Clearwater, had 12 years of experience, a framed certificate from Johns Hopkins on his office wall, and a way of speaking to support staff that made them feel like furniture that had been rearranged slightly wrong. He was not cruel in any deliberate way. He was something harder to argue against. He was indifferent. To him, ER techs were hands and feet. They moved things, they held things, they retrieved things. They did not speak in his operating space unless spoken to, and they were certainly not expected to have opinions. He met Tara on her third day when she was restocking the crash cart in Bay 2. He walked past, glanced at the layout she'd organized, and rearranged 2 items without comment. Then he left. She put them back. He noticed. He didn't say anything. For the first 3 weeks, Tara Winslow became the hospital's invisible presence. She took the worst assignments without complaint. The cleaning, the hauling, the biohazard containment that made newer techs gag. She did them with the same unhurried, exact efficiency she brought to everything. She never fumbled. She never dropped things. When a cardiac patient in Bay 4 coded at 2 a.m. and the junior nurse froze, Tara had already positioned the crash cart before anyone called for it. Colleen noticed that. She didn't say anything about it. What Colleen did say something about was the night a 44-year-old man came in, presenting with what Beaumont was already calling a textbook inferior MI. The man was pale, sweating, complaining of jaw pain radiating down his left arm. Classic presentation. Beaumont had the team moving on the standard protocol before the EKG had finished printing. Tara was near the doorway, holding a secondary IV kit nobody had asked for. She spoke quietly, directing her words at the monitor reading. "He has no ST elevation. His rhythm looks like a Wellens pattern, type B. If you go straight to the cath lab without ruling out the proximal LA-D involvement, you might be chasing the wrong vessel." The room went silent in the way rooms go silent when something unexpected happens near a live wire. Beaumont turned slowly. He looked at her the way a professor looks at a student who has spoken out of turn at a seminar they were only allowed to audit. "Who," he said flatly, "asked you?" "Nobody," Tara said. She didn't look away. His pain scale just jumped to 9 and his BP dropped 4 points in the last 2 minutes. Beaumont stared at her for a moment. Then he turned back to the patient and continued with his protocol. The cath team was called. The patient went upstairs. They found a proximal LAD lesion, exactly where Tara had indicated. Nobody mentioned it afterward. Beaumont filed it as a diagnostic refinement. Colleen handed Tara a stack of linen requisition forms that evening and walked away without speaking. The quiet assessment continued, on both sides. It was a Thursday evening in late March, at 6:47 p.m., when the radio at the central desk emitted 3 short bursts. A tone pattern Colleen Burr had never heard in 11 years running that floor. She picked up the receiver. She listened. Her face moved through 3 distinct expressions in about 4 seconds: confusion, disbelief, and something close to fear. She put the handset down with deliberate care. "I need all available personnel in the main trauma bay right now," she announced, and the control in her voice was so thin it was almost not there. "We have a mass casualty transport inbound from Fort Harrison. Multiple critical. ETA 7 minutes. The base medevac is down. Mechanical failure. We are the closest facility." She paused. "Military police will arrive before the patients. Do not impede them." The ER shifted into a different gear entirely. Nurses moved faster. The 2 on-call residents appeared from somewhere, looking young and startled. Dr. Beaumont emerged from the physician's lounge, coffee in hand, and the cup went still halfway to his mouth when he saw the expression on Colleen's face. "How many?" he asked. 3 critical, 2 stable. The unstable one. Colleen glanced at her notes. Staff Sergeant Hayden Pryor, Ranger. Blast injury. They applied field hemostatics in transit, but he's been hemorrhaging for 22 minutes. 2 MPs came through the front entrance, first, moving fast, their hands nowhere near their holsters, but their presence alone reshaping the energy of the waiting room. Behind them came a pair of Army combat medics in multicam fatigues, their faces gone unreadable in the way people's faces go when they've been operating in crisis for a sustained period and are running on the last margin of their composure. Then the gurney. Staff Sergeant Hayden Pryor was 6 feet 2 inches of soldier, and right now he occupied approximately none of that space in any meaningful way. He was gray in the particular shade that people turn when their blood pressure has been below 60 for too long. Both legs of his uniform had been cut away. His right thigh was wrapped in field dressings so thoroughly soaked they had stopped being absorbent and become structural, holding shape but not function. A tourniquet was ratcheted above the wound, biting into muscle. His chest rose and fell in the shallow, mechanical rhythm of a body working very hard at a job it was losing the capacity to perform. Blast fragmentation to the right thigh and lower abdomen, the lead combat medic reported, voice clipped and professional as she transferred care at the threshold. Femoral involvement, confirmed by field assessment. 3 packages of quick clot and 2 tourniquets applied. He arrested briefly in transit. We brought him back, but he's been in and out. Last blood pressure was 64 over palp. Beaumont was already moving, snapping on gloves. Bay 1, transfer on my count. They moved Pryor onto the table. He made a sound that was not quite a groan, and not quite anything else. A sound that came from somewhere below language. "Get those tourniquets off," Beaumont ordered, reaching for the ratchet on the field dressing. "I need to visualize the bleeds." "Stop." The word came out of Tara Winslow's mouth at a volume, and with a register that had no business belonging to a person who had spent 3 weeks pushing a linen cart. It cracked through the room the way a starter pistol cracks. Not particularly loud, but carrying some quality of absolute authority that made every person present respond before they'd consciously decided to. Beaumont spun around. "Excuse me?" Tara was already moving toward the table. She wasn't running. She never ran. She moved the way she always moved. with that terrifying quiet economy that Colleen had been watching for 3 weeks without being able to name. His systolic is in the low 60s and dropping. If you release the femoral tourniquet before you have proximal vascular control and a mass transfusion protocol running, you will have approximately 40 seconds before he exsanguinates. You won't be able to clamp fast enough. You are an ER tech, Beaumont said, and his voice had gone very flat. You do not. He has distended neck veins and his trachea is shifting. Tara was looking at Pryor's throat, her eyes reading him the way a mechanic reads an engine. Practical, diagnostic, without drama. He has a secondary tension component developing in his left hemithorax. If you go straight for the leg wound, you will fix one problem and the other one will kill him in the meantime. Beaumont's face cycled through a rapid succession of emotions that his professional composure was struggling to contain. Security, he said carefully. I need this person removed from my bay. One of the combat medics, Sergeant First Class Danny Okafor, built like a door, with 4 deployments and a quiet manner that took up more room than it appeared to, stepped into the space between Beaumont and the table. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Beaumont looked at him, then at Tara. Simon. Her voice dropped, not softer, denser. The way iron gets when it cools. She used his first name the way a commanding officer uses one, as a signal, not a familiarity. Step back, right now. He is going to code in 90 seconds if we don't move. Something in the room shifted. Colleen Burr felt it before she understood it. A redistribution of gravity, a realignment of who was running what. She looked at Tara's hands. They were already prepped, already moving toward the secondary chest kit. She'd pulled it from the supply cart without anyone seeing her do it. Colleen, Tara didn't look up. I need the massive transfusion protocol. 4 units O-neg, 4 FFP, and get the level 1 infuser primed, now. Colleen moved. She wasn't sure why. Later, she would say it was because the alternative was watching the man on the table die while the adults argued. But that wasn't entirely it. There was something in the quality of Tara's instructions, the exactness of them, the total absence of hesitation, that bypassed Colleen's 11 years of professional resistance the way a master key bypasses a lock. Beaumont started to step forward. Okafor's hand came up, not touching him. Just present. Give her room, Doc, the sergeant said quietly. Trust me. Tara moved to the chest. The needle decompression was textbook, better than textbook, because textbook implied a certain procedural caution, and what Tara was doing had no caution in it at all, only accuracy. The hiss of released pressure was audible across the room. Pryor's oxygen saturation, which had been skating toward the low 70s, ticked upward by 3 points almost immediately. Colleen, start the blood. Fast. Use the pressure bags. Tara was at the leg now, her hands reading the wound geometry with her fingers, working through the dressings without unwrapping them. Okafor, the packing. How many packages? What brand? How deep? 3 quick clot combat gauze, packed to resistance at roughly 12 centimeters. The fragmentation went lateral to the packing margin, Tara said, almost to herself. That's why it didn't hold. She looked up briefly. I need a vascular surgical kit, and I need the OR cleared. If it's running down a delect case, pull them out. The OR has an appendectomy in progress, one of the residents offered. Pause it. You can't just. Pause it, Tara said. No volume, no argument possible. The resident picked up the phone. Beaumont stood against the wall. His hands were at his sides. His face had gone through something private and difficult, and he was on the other side of it now, very still, watching a woman he had genuinely never looked at perform emergency trauma stabilization in his ER with the systematic calm of someone who had done this before. Not in a simulation, not in a residency, somewhere real, under conditions he could not quite imagine, and was beginning to understand that he shouldn't try to. At 7:04 p.m., Staff Sergeant Pryor's heart stopped. The monitor delivered its single flat tone. 2 of the junior nurses made involuntary sounds. One of the combat medics stepped forward. Fatera stepped back half a pace, assessed the rhythm for exactly 2 seconds, and said, compressions. Hard. Okafor, you're on chest. Don't pace yourself. Okafor locked his hands over Pryor's sternum, and bore down with the controlled force of a man who understood the mechanics involved. The sound of compressions in a silent room is something you don't forget. AP, Tara said, 1 milligram IV push, and get that blood running wide open. Colleen had the blood going. Her hands were not shaking. She was operating on something below conscious decision, trained automaticity, redirected by the weight of the authority in the room. Push the epi, Tara said, then quietly, to no one in particular and to the man on the table specifically. Come back, Sergeant, you're not done yet. 40 seconds of compressions, 50. At 58 seconds, the monitor spiked. Irregular at first, 2 beats, a pause, 3 more. Then it found its rhythm, slow, shallow, but there. Sinus Brady, Colleen called out, her voice carrying something she was working to keep out of it. BP is coming up, 62/40 and climbing. The exhale that moved through the room sounded like wind through a narrow space. Tara stepped back. She stripped her gloves one at a time and dropped them into the biohazard bin, with the deliberate precision of someone who needs a moment and is taking exactly as much of it as they need. On the table, Pryor's eyes opened, unfocused, swimming in the haze of shock and whatever drugs were running through his line. He looked at the ceiling, he looked at the monitors, then his gaze drifted, slowly, to the woman standing at the foot of his bed, the one in the plain navy scrubs, with the dark hair pulled back and the quiet hands, who had just reached into his chest and pulled him back from wherever he had been going. He blinked. Something moved across his face, the specific expression of a mind running on fumes, trying to access a file it knows is there. Then it landed. His right hand came up. It shook badly. His fingers pressed against his temple in a salute, so fragile it was almost painful to witness. The last remnant of an ingrained reflex, overriding the morphine, overriding the shock, overriding the simple mechanics of a body that had nearly given up. Doc Winslow, he whispered. Bravo Company. Kandahar Province, 2019. His hand dropped. His eyes drifted shut. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. Thought you were. Gone. Tara's hand came to rest on his forearm. Just briefly, just long enough. Still here, she said. Rest now. The military surgical team from Fort Harrison arrived 17 minutes later, by which point Pryor was already in the OR under the care of the hospital's vascular surgeon, who had been pulled from home and who performed the arterial repair with the focused, grateful attention of a man who understood what kind of groundwork he had been handed. In the corridor outside, Colleen Burr found Tara washing her hands at the scrub station. Colleen stood behind her for a moment, looking at the back of her head, trying to locate the woman who had been restocking linen carts 3 weeks ago and coming up empty. Who are you? Colleen asked. It wasn't rude, it wasn't accusatory, it was simply the most honest question Colleen Burr had asked in a long time. Tara dried her hands. She looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. The fluorescent light was not kind to anyone, and it was especially unsparing tonight, finding the hollows around her eyes, the particular weariness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has gotten very good at not letting it show. I'm an ear tech, she said. I have 3 hours left on my shift. She picked up her stethoscope, left scrub pocket, always, and walked back toward the floor. Colonel Diane Hartley arrived at 9:30 p.m., in dress uniform, flanked by 2 officers from the Fort Harrison Medical Command. She was a compact woman with iron gray hair and the posture of someone who has spent decades making rooms pay attention without raising her voice. She walked past Walter Hines, the hospital administrator, without stopping, through the controlled aftershock of an ER, still processing the evening, and she found Tara Winslow at the bedside of a 12-year-old in Bay 6, applying a temporary splint, explaining the process in the unhurried, patient voice of someone who has never once spoken to a child in condescension. Winslow, Hartley said. Tara looked up. Something passed between them. Not warmth, exactly, but the specific recognition of 2 people who have been through things that require no spoken inventory. Colonel, Tara said. Hines had followed at a half jog. He looked between the 2 women with the expression of a man who has realized the meeting he thought he was chairing had been running without him for some time. Someone needs to explain to me, he started. Hartley turned to him with a courtesy that was complete and gave him absolutely nothing. Then she addressed the corridor, because what she had to say needed to be understood by the people standing in it. Tara Winslow served 3 tours, with 1st Special Forces Group as an 18 Delta, Special Forces Medical Sergeant. She deployed to Afghanistan twice and Iraq once, and she ran forward surgical care under active combat conditions for the better part of 6 years. Hartley paused. She holds the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Valor, and a Combat Medical Badge. Her service record is sealed under a Department of Defense classification level. This hospital does not have clearance to access, which is why your background check came back the way it did. Beaumont had appeared at the edge of the corridor. He stood very still. She left the service 4 years ago, Hartley continued, and her voice shifted, a fraction of something different in it, quieter, more careful. Winslow's team, a 12-man operational Detachment Alpha, walked into an ambush in Kunar Province. She treated 9 of her teammates under fire, performing emergency surgical interventions with no power, no sterile field, and a supply kit designed for 4 casualties, not 9. The hallway was very quiet. She didn't lose a single man she could reach in time. Another pause. 3 of them she couldn't reach in time. Her team sergeant was one of the 3. Tara was looking at the wall, a particular kind of looking, not seeing the wall, seeing something else entirely, something a long way from Montana. A single controlled breath moved through her, and she let it go. She resigned from service 8 months after returning stateside, Hartley said. She said she didn't want to hold a scalpel anymore. She didn't want to be the person who made the final call. She went back to school for her tech certification, a pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. She said she just wanted to take care of people. Walter Hines opened his mouth, closed it. Beaumont stepped fully into the corridor. His face had the particular look of a person who has been handed a version of themselves that they don't recognize and is not certain how to hold. He looked at Tara. Really looked at her, the way you look at something you have been seeing without perceiving for weeks on end. I owe you an apology, he said. The words came out stiffly, like language he was translating in real time. I was wrong about you. About all of it. He swallowed. You saved Pryor's life. You would have saved him faster if I hadn't been in the way. Tara looked at him. Not unkindly, not warmly. With the specific evenness of someone who has long since stopped keeping score and is just trying to get through the next task. You're a good clinician, Simon, she said. You know your protocols. You're methodical under pressure. A beat. The problem with protocols is they're designed for the average case. Most of what walks through a trauma bay isn't average. She reached past him for a chart off the rack. Fort Harrison hosts a TCCC refresher course every spring through the Regional Trauma Network. You should go. It would change how you see injuries like Pryor's. Beaumont looked at her for a long moment. Yes, ma'am, he said, and the ma'am seemed to surprise him as much as anyone. Colleen Burr had been standing at the edge of the group for the last several minutes, holding a roll of medical tape in both hands, turning it over and over. You going to leave now? She asked Tara. Now that everyone knows? Tara glanced at the ER board. 17 patients, 4 in active treatment, 2 more incoming from a highway accident on Route 3. The night shift was understaffed. It was always understaffed. No, she said. No? I still have 3 hours on my shift. She looked at Colleen and something in her face, just briefly, went quietly wry. And you're short tonight. I can see it from here. Colleen Burr, who had not cried on a shift in 11 years, pressed her lips together very tightly and found something to study in the ceiling tiles for a moment. Before Colonel Hartley's convoy pulled out of the parking lot, Sergeant First Class Okafor stopped in the ambulance bay. The night air came in cold off the Montana flats, carrying the smell of pine and open distance. He reached into the front pocket of his tactical vest and came out with a worn bronze coin. The insignia of the 75th Ranger Regiment on one face, a Latin inscription on the other. He pressed it into Tara's hand without ceremony. Pryor's going to make it, he said. The surgical team called down 20 minutes ago. Said the groundwork you laid was. He stopped, let out a breath through his nose. He's going to make it, ma'am. Tara looked down at the coin. She had two like it already, from other hands, from other years. She closed her fingers around this one. Good, she said. He still owes me a chess rematch. Called it in Kandahar, and then the mission got extended. Something broke open in Okafor's expression, brief, real, from a place that didn't get used often enough. Then he squared up and pressed his fingers to his temple. Clean and sharp. Tara returned it. The muscle memory was bone deep. Then she went back inside. The ER hummed the way it always did. Alarms, voices, the particular percussion of a place that runs on urgency and caffeine, and the stubborn conviction that the next hour can be survived. At the nurse's station, Colleen handed Tara the chart for Bay 4 without comment, except for one small thing. She put the chart into Tara's hands instead of sliding it across the desk. It wasn't much. In an ER, nothing is ever very much. But Tara Winslow took it, clipped her stethoscope from her left pocket, and walked down the corridor. Unhurried, unassuming, and exactly where she needed to be.